Thanks for staying with us. You're still watching the conversation right here on News Central TV. Earlier on, we dealt with discussions in Nigeria where the Accountant General of the Federation has been arrested by the EFCC over corruption allegations to the tune of 80 billion naira. And right now, we're dealing with situations in South Africa where the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture said it will review its plans to build a 100-meter tall monumental flag that was to cost 22 million rand. The government's plans were met with outrage and criticisms from citizens, political parties and other groups, with many saying the government was spending exorbitant amounts of money when many have struggled to secure any funding or aid from the department over the last 2 years of COVID-19 lockdowns.
Now, monumental flags are typically installed by countries to express their identity and pride, and South Africa's intention to build one was first announced in February 2022. The department noted that the flag is the symbol of nationhood and the common identity of the people of South Africa. Once constructed, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture said the flag would become a national landmark and a tourist attraction site that would serve to display the country's brand image. Now, join us this evening from South Africa to discuss this. We have Thulebona Mhlango, an entrepreneur and thought leader. We also have Carol Olerato Manyaapelo, a researcher. They both join in from Johannesburg, South Africa. A warm welcome to you, ladies, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Good evening to you both and your viewers.
And thank you for having us.
So I'd like to start with Carol. Why is the decision to build a flag monument by the Ministry of Sports, Arts and Culture so contentious?
It's contentious on a basis that we are facing a lot of socio-economic issues in South Africa. So it's more like an insult for the government to want to build a flag of 22 million. If you go into the statistics of South African unemployment rate, there's high unemployment rate, and in terms of also service delivery, there's also there's lack of service delivery in South Africa, and also when you check the corruption rate in the government in South Africa, one would also say that the outrage is not a shock that it happened, because South African people do not have faith in the government to execute or to use such money. So building that flag, it doesn't make sense why the flag is important, because the government was at least supposed to use those funds to assist artists who were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and or also to maybe assist in terms of building or branding the art centers in South Africa. Because if you can look around the art centers around South Africa, you'd see that there's a lot of work that is needed to be done in those art centers. So the funding would rather be distributed to do such instead of building a flag. So the outreach was bound to happen, because this announcement by the Minister Nathi Mthethwa was like an insult, not only to South African, but mostly to South African youth who are unemployed and sitting at home with no qualification. So the government, I'm so glad that the government is going to review this whole decision, and I am hoping that we'll hear something positive from their discussion or from the review. And I'm hoping that the government will also look into reducing the price rather, because if we all know that such momentum flags are installed in countries in terms of in countries to express their identity and pride. Right. So these flags are indeed needed in countries, but the government should reconsider the amount of money to spend in such a project.
Okay. Yes. All right, Thulebona, now still going in the direction of what Carol has said, we know that civil action groups have actually called it a monumental waste of money. So do you think that the DSAC is actually disconnected from the reality of what the people are facing? Because the Minister of Sports, Natim Danteto, actually said that this will bring a lot of money to the country. So what's your feeling on that?
I think you're quite right, and you rightfully pointed out that certainly there are more competing priorities that government could look at. At the moment, as Carol pointed out, that South Africa is facing no less than 35% of unemployment rate. We've got, a crisis in KwaZulu-Natal of flooding, where really a lot of families have been left displaced, and of course, we as a developing economy are still, left reeling from the impact of COVID-19. That has certainly left a lot of artists and a lot of poor emerging businesses, quite under. And so we are dealing with a lot of socioeconomic impact from COVID-19. But not only that, beyond that, in July 2021, we also saw a lot of civil unrest in South Africa. And of course, this was due to frustration of, by South Africans of unemployment, poverty and inequality. As you know, that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And so when you come and make an announcement that you're spending 22 million rand on a 100-meter flag, one has to then consider whether the government really thinks about what is important at this stage, because we do know that South Africa is also one of those countries that suffered a growth in their contraction in their growth, which means that we are not creating enough jobs, we're not creating enough activity in the economy. So how do you then make a decision to employ so much of financial resources in a country that's beset with so many socioeconomic challenges? And we are also at the moment in the middle of, I think, our fourth recession in our economy. And so we are not creating as much growth that we would like to see in the economy. We are also dealing with all sorts of challenges when it comes to our own arts and culture sector, where artists are not getting jobs. Our national art centers are not being renovated. And so you're seeing a really disconnected picture by government between us and them, where they are not really thinking about what it is that South Africans need at the moment. And what you'll see going forward is a frustration from South Africans, and such decisions, as you rightfully pointed out, that it's wasteful expenditure, as people have been reeling and people have been noting, will lead to obviously an undermining of democracy, because people, especially South Africans, do not relate to this flag as their national identity or pride. And so I don't see how it will bring tourism, especially in this economy, especially during this pandemic. For me, it doesn't make sense that the South African government has sat down and actually made this decision and thought it was a bright idea.
Thank you very much, Thulebona. Now, Carol, do you see any positives coming out of this? Because the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture said the flag will become a national landmark, a tourist attraction site that would serve to display the country's brand image. Tourism is a good thing. Tourism is a critical sector of the South African economy, and a lot of revenue can be generated from visiting tourists. What do you make of this?
I really don't think there's a positive thing about this flag. Like the last speaker has just alluded that.
Sorry to interrupt you. If it wasn't this expensive, would you still complain about it, or you just think it's a waste of priority and time?
If it wasn't, no.
Yeah, let's say it was cheaper.
If it was cheaper.
If it was cheaper, yes, I think because each and every, if you remember, each and every office or each and every department is allocated funds. So if it was much cheaper, it was going to make more sense, because they are utilizing their own funds, which are distributed to them by the government. So the minister should just relook on the funds and not spend 22 million, because 22 million is just a lot of money to spend on over a flag.
What about the tourism potential of the?
And it will, yes, because as I said earlier on, such flags, they help countries, or they are instilled in countries in order for countries to express their identity and pride. And the Minister further alluded that he is installing such a flag because he believes that even South Africans alone, before we could invite tourists in our country, South Africans alone do not know their flag symbols and so forth. So this flag will not only educate us as South Africans, but it will also educate our tourists. So in terms of tourism, because we are still in a pandemic, I don't think the flag will really make
it's not as big as Kruger National Park or Table Mountain in Cape Town. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Thulebona, now while you're still looking at this as much of a monumental waste of money, I know also that the Congress of South African Trade Union has actually called for the sacking of the minister. That's Nathi Mthethwa. What are your thoughts on this, and what do you think the President Ramaphosa should do at this point in time?
I do think that, the president should reprimand the minister, and I think there has been some debate around what course of action should be taken. I do think that when you are looking at the decisions that Nathi Mthethwa has taken over the years, at least during his tenure, they haven't been to the benefit of his sector. And so one has to question whether government is serious about serving its country. And I certainly, would like to point out that, in my opinion, I think government needs to abandon the project. Even if they claim that it would attract, tourism, and it would, contribute to social cohesion and all sorts of national pride, there are other ways of doing it. And I suppose what they've actually pointed out in their feasibility studies, that South Africa needs such a project. However, the timing of it is quite questionable because it comes at a time where South Africans are not looking for that. There are other ways that they can show national pride. Now, South Africa is one of the few countries that when the regime, blood, and of course we are referred to as a rainbow nation for a reason. So therefore, we are, it's incumbent on us as South Africans to know what the national flag means. However, I feel like this part of the project is certainly not one of the ways in which we could do it. And people are always keen to come to South Africa. I mean, we've got all sorts of tourist attractions, and of course we could work around what kind of tourism attraction projects we work towards in order to create jobs, one, and two, to certainly augment our culture and our national pride as South Africans. But spending 22 million rand on a national project does not make sense to me. The timing of it is quite off, and I certainly do think that our artists are currently facing all sorts of challenges. And I think the minister needs to review his decision around what kind of things he funds, but the president needs to definitely take a stand on this. And I know that there also was some sort of criticism that he suffered earlier on around a joke that he made, about his dialogue with the minister, whether he should abandon the project or review it. And I know that, it's a matter of semantics. Does he abandon or review? And in my view, I think he needs to. And I think you would appreciate that the reason why we are, citizens up against all of this project is because we certainly feel like we don't own this project. It's not ours. They did not ask us whether South Africa does need such a project during this time. So in my view, I think the president needs to think about who he places in that position in the next cabinet reshuffle.
Thank you, Thulebona. Just before we wrap up, in 30 seconds, Carol, if you can, is this the end? Because in the statement the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture released, it says, and I quote, the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture directed his department to review the process related to the monumental flag in this country. What does this imply? And is this the end of the project? Because the general consensus from the public is they don't want this flag. It's not priority.
I think it is the end of the project. Like the last speaker has just alluded that perhaps the minister should look into investing in other tourist attractions, which we already have in South Africa, and like building a 22 million flag. So I think indeed it is the end of the project. And I'm hoping that, like the last speaker has alluded, that the president will reconsider reshuffling the minister, because he is really so not in touch with what is currently happening in this portfolio of the arts and the arts culture, the arts and the sports, art and culture, because there are a lot of challenges which are going on in that position. And South Africans always argue that he is only available when he's supposed to give out a rest in peace for an artist. But when they truly need him, he's never around. So it clearly shows that he does not know what
he
he's
hasn't
doing
lived up to the mandate of his ministry. Thank you very much. I would like to say a big thank you to you all for being a part of today's conversation. Thanks for your insights and contribution.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, this is where we wrap up the conversation today. In the first half of the show, we were looking at the arrest of the Accountant General in Nigeria, and in the second half, we just concluded our conversation on the 22 million rand flag monument project. Thank you for being a part of the conversation today. I'm Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Bye-bye.